Welcome back. Today's video is very small and we will be just talking about the Cartesian plane. Cartesian plane are also called the rectangular coordinate system. So Cartesian plane, they represent the ordered pairs of real numbers by points, that means in the form of x comma y in a plane. So x and y, they are called the coordinate form, right? And when we represent that on the x and y axis, that is called the Cartesian plane. When we are using the word plane, we are talking about two dimension. You might have heard about the terminology line, plane and point in geometry class. Slope is nothing but the steepness of a line, steepness of the road. And to calculate slope, we use y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That means rise over run. And lowercase m is used for slope. To write in the slope intercept form, we are using y is equal to mx plus b. On the other hand, to write point slope form, because point is there, x and y, we use those coordinates. So y minus y1 will be equal to m times x minus x1. M is nothing but the slope of a line. So this is the basic things that you have learned in Algebra 1. Now building on this, let's create a coordinate plane. So on the coordinate plane, the horizontal is the x-axis and the vertical is the y-axis. On the coordinate plane, we can plot these points, x and y. So in order to calculate, for example, if you have to calculate what is the midpoint of a line, midpoint is nothing but the average of the x coordinate and the average of the y coordinate. I call it as m of x because it is easier for my students to understand that midpoint x and midpoint y. Now when we are talking about the average, it implies we are adding the two x coordinates together divided by 2 and adding the two y coordinates together and dividing by 2. This is how you can calculate the midpoint. So let's represent it on the coordinate plane. We have x1, x2, y1 and y2. And let's plot the points, any random points, just for understanding. And if we have a line, and if we want to calculate midpoint, so the midpoint will be in between these 2 points, x1, y1 and x2, y2. That is why we calculate the average of the x and the average of y. Now the another thing is the distance. How to find the distance between the line if it is given in the coordinate plane, if it is given in the x and y axis. For example, let's create a right triangle. In a right triangle, if the lengths are not given, we just have the coordinates x1, y1 and x2, y2. So in that scenario, if I have to calculate the steepness of the line, in this case, steepness of the line, as you can see from the triangle, we are talking about the hypotenuse. So that steepness of the line, that distance, steepness, and I mean to say not the slope, the total length of that steep line, that is called the distance. And for that, I can use x2, y2 and x1, y1 because the hypotenuse is creating a slope, right? So when I said slope, can I use the formula for slope to calculate the distance? Yes, because the distance formula is x2 minus x1 squared, which is nothing but the run of the slope, and y2 minus y1 squared, that is nothing but the rise of the slope. So if you know the slope, rise over run, and if you square rise squared plus run squared inside the radical, that is nothing but your distance, because basically we are also using the Pythagorean theorem in this, right? To calculate hypotenuse, we use Pythagorean. Thank you. Make sure to like and subscribe.